There's a strange comfort in routine. After all the years of looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows, and waking up in cold sweats, I found some solace in the simple things. A warm cup of tea, a flickering television, and the sound of a game show crowd laughing at jokes that weren't all that funny. It wasn't peace exactly, but it was close enough. Or at least that's what I told myself. That night started like any other. The weather outside was dreadful. Cold rain battering the windows and the kind of damp chill that seeps into your bones. I'd settled into my chair, the same old armchair I've had for decades, and turned on the TV for a bit of background noise. It wasn't about watching anything, really. It was about filling the silence, keeping the quiet from creeping in too close. I wasn't really paying attention to the show. I'd seen that episode a dozen times before. The kind of mindless thing you leave on when you just want the company of noise. But then, right in the middle of some cheesy joke, the screen flickered, just for a second, barely enough to notice. The picture jumped, a ripple of static rolling across the screen before it steadied again. I figured it was nothing. The old set had its quirks, and the wiring in this house isn't exactly reliable. But when it happened again, just a few minutes later, I sat up a little straighter. This time the flicker lasted longer. The sound cut out, replaced by a faint crackle like an old radio caught between stations. I reached for the remote, ready to switch it off, but before I could, everything changed. I knew that hallway, the wallpaper, the way the light bulb at the end flickered. It was Mapleview. I hadn't seen that place in years, but the image was burned into my memory. My chest tightened, and I told myself it had to be a coincidence, some old tape broadcasting on a dead channel. But deep down, I knew better. That place, it didn't let go so easily. For a while, the hallway just sat there on the screen, empty, still like it was waiting for something. I couldn't look away. And then, out of the corner of the frame, something moved. It wasn't human, not entirely. Too tall, too thin, its limbs stretched in ways that didn't make sense. And its movements, they were wrong, stilted, like a puppet with tangled strings. It took another step, then another, each one slow and deliberate, dragging itself closer. I gripped the armrest of my chair, my breath caught in my throat as the shadow moved into the flickering light. I could feel the air in the room change, colder, heavier, pressing down on me. And then, as if it could sense me watching, the thing stopped. It turned its head, slow and unnatural, and tilted it just enough that I knew it was looking at me. The whispers came next, faint at first, like wind slipping through cracks in the walls. But they grew louder, overlapping until they weren't whispers anymore. They were voices, dozens of them, maybe more, all tangled together, saying things I couldn't understand. And then cutting through the chaos, one voice rose above the rest. "Walter," it said, soft, hollow, but unmistakable. It was her, Mrs. Langston. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest as her voice came again, clearer this time. "Why did you leave?" she asked. "You know they never left." I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, that it was just a bad dream or some trick of the TV. But the way it moved, the sound of the voices, it wasn't like anything I'd ever experienced before. That thing on the screen, whatever it was getting closer. I could feel it, the weight of its presence pressing down on me, the room growing colder with every step it took. I grabbed the remote, my hands shaking so bad I could barely press the buttons. But nothing worked. The screen stayed locked on that hallway, the shadow growing larger, filling the frame as it reached out with one of its long, bony hands. And just like that, it was gone. The screen went dark, the voices stopped, and the room fell into this awful, suffocating silence. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the blank screen, waiting for it to come back. But it didn't. Not that night, anyway. I didn't sleep. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that hallway, that shadow. I could still hear her voice, faint and distant, asking me that same question. Why did you leave? And even now, when the house is quiet and the TV's off, sometimes I think I can hear it again, buried in the static, whispering my name.